State Question 777, Oklahoma Agriculture. State Question 777 creates a constitutional protection for farming and ranching in Oklahoma, guaranteeing the rights to make use of agricultural technology, livestock procedure, and ranching practices. This protection may not be infringed upon except in cases where the government has a compelling state interest of the highest order. Supporters say, this enumerates the right to farm and ranch, which has largely been assumed to exist in Oklahoma already, creating a constitutional protection rather than an assumed protection. This measure protects traditional agricultural practices from costly regulations that have been enacted by courts and legislatures in other states. It does not forbid any practices currently being used, such as organic farming. Opponents say, this will make it more difficult to prevent certain types of animal cruelty. This could also make future statewide planning for natural resources more difficult. With the dawn of additives, growth hormones, pesticides, and genetic modifications, it is irresponsible to take away regulation of the farming industry. Any questions on State Question 777? Yes, ma'am.
Who decides whether the state has a compelling interest of the highest order?
Okay. Compelling, that would be the court. Although in certain instances, the Oklahoma legislature has already addressed some of those, specifically in water. In 2016, I believe it was Representative Terry O'Donnell actually addressed the water issue, trying to make sure that at the end of the day, that was a compelling state interest. I'm not a lawyer, but you can look at many things that would be a compelling state interest: water, natural resources, air quality. All those things could easily be classified as a compelling state interest if you go too far in terms of non-regulation. This would not, and then I will also say that this would not affect any regulation that's currently on the books. Thank you for the question.
If I could just state, we're obviously taping this and trying to get all the audio on. So
Sure.
we're running around with this.
Mike, this is our mayor.
Okay.
And runner.
Okay.
Mike, could you give us an example of where this question would be appropriate or where it would come into play with a farmer's rights versus the state and vice versa?
We've been following State Question 777 since, and this one, by the way, and the first question were both legislative referendums, and I should have started with that. This one ran through the legislature, and any legislative referendum doesn't have to be signed by the governor, but it has to basically pass both the House and Senate. This is the second legislative referendum that is on the ballot. The question is there specific examples where this could affect? And I have seen State Question 777 in an effort earlier today, the first one, because the corporate farming issue has started to come up quite a bit versus the family farmer issue. And I believe that the people who are running State Question 777 and the campaign consultants that are running that question have started to address that. Okay. In terms of corporate farming versus family farming, they are basically saying that it's going to protect both and equally, because for the most part they both have the same interest. But in terms of where this would be in effect, let's say, for example, and I refer to this example quite often. It's California. There was a bill that went through the legislature that increased the cage size of chickens, and for the first time since World War II, eggs in California were no longer the cheapest form of protein, and that they basically doubled or almost tripled the size of those cages in a realm in an effort to try to decrease animal cruelty. But at the same time, there was no real discussion in terms of how that would affect the consumer, which is also a compelling state interest because that affects the cost of food. And I think that other states have already adopted something similar to State Question 777. And this is an attempt to try to hinder DEQ in Oklahoma, hinder the EPA's reach at the federal level if they push something down. This is an attempt to try to limit regulation, but at the same time, many people on the other side, which I try to present both, are saying that this goes too far in terms of her protection, because at the end of the day, they won't be able to. It's too high of a standard, as was stated in the compelling state interest, of the highest order. That's too high of a legal standard to actually allow for additional regulation to occur. Thank you for the question. Other questions on State Question 777?
Does this mean that there'll be zero regulation?
No. The regulations that are currently in place or future regulations that are proposed by any entity that is regulating the farming industry, those can still be put in place. The issue is this does protect what I would classify as the traditional farming and ranching practices. There's also been an effort in the past to hinder the farmer's ability to be able to use a corral, to be able to use branding, to be able to use those kinds of things, as well as pesticides, and we addressed that as one of the opponents. This would give additional protections as that debate continues to flare in the United States. And there are outside entities that would oppose this because they want to be able to hinder the production of protein. And this would propose a slowdown of that hindrance. But like I said, the opponents to this would say that this is too far reaching and would disallow their ability in its entirety to regulate the industry, which, based on my knowledge and discussions of my past life in the legislature, I'm a recovering legislator, I would say that probably doesn't completely hinder it, but it does raise it to a new level within the realm of the judiciary.
So how would this question, what kind of impact does it have on future statewide planning? It says here to make it more
Yeah,
difficult.
that's water. That's water. So you've seen some of the ads. I think there's even one right out here straight south of Guthrie, because I drive I-35 going to root on my Cowboys. But in terms of water, I think that's one of the arguments against State Question 777. Now, the legislature did go ahead and place in statute that water would be a compelling state interest, because they knew this was one of the issues that would probably come up as they were debating this state question.
Which makes that a mute point.
Now, from the opponent's perspective, they would probably say, well, you can change state law much easier than you can actually run a campaign to change the Oklahoma Constitution, which is true. But as a former legislator, I will also tell you that it's extremely hard to change state law as well. And it was, per our founders, designed to be such.
So do puppy mills fit under this?
Based on, I would say that the question is do puppy mills fit under this? I don't see a hindrance, and I was the House author of the bill that actually made sure that we, from a perspective of not allowing puppy mills, I don't think that this state question actually hinders that. And that is currently the state law anyway. Puppy mills is a side issue that certain groups want to make a very prominent issue, but I don't believe that this would actually completely hinder the ability to regulate those puppy mills, specifically because they're already under state statute.
And that's one of the things that's outlined in this vote adjustment about the puppy mills. Serious unintended consequences would give puppy mills, cockfighters, and factory farm employees license to treat vulnerable creatures.
I'm not, right, that's somebody else's, yeah. That's what opponents say, and that's fair, and we hear that argument as well. But I think that if you read State Question 777 and start to understand the purpose of State Question 777, as well as state statute, I have a hard time coming to the conclusion that it would disallow all regulation of those types of entities.
If you could, in order to get the audio, if you could wait till I get to you. I know I'm not as quick as I used to be, but I'm trying.
Okay, I'd just like to say that one of the things that, that really resonated with me was the idea that no local, city, county entity could pass any laws, that this would supersede that our elected officials, maybe in the next biggest class, they may see some issues that need to be addressed.
Sure.
They wouldn't be able to do that because the Constitution will have been changed to allow this. And, I'm in favor of farms and local farmers and all of that, but the idea that this is something that has really been brought to us from outside to make it more feasible for corporate farms, that's the sense that I have with that.
Okay. I'll attempt to address that question. I don't know that this has been brought to us from somebody outside, because if you look at who's actually running the state question and who's behind it, it's all of our farming entities statewide. So I don't know that it's outside. I will say that I do hear that from local entities, and many local communities have taken a position of being opposed to State Question 777, especially mayors, city councils, and those have taken some positions opposed to that. But state law also supersedes what local entities, because that is also a subsidiary of the state, just as counties are and cities are. So if something in state statute versus the Constitution gets passed, then that would actually disallow the city from actually being able to do that as well. But I do believe that this is an effort from Oklahoma entities to actually protect. And then I believe that there is also a local effort from local entities to oppose as well.
You gave us a great example on what supporters say about State Question 777. Can you offer us something that opponents have to say about the state question?
Sure. And we kind of went through that beginning, and then there was a few that were also added from the puppy mills perspective, and then also from the local community not being able to pass something to hinder, let's say, for example, zoning and those types of issues. I think that that's something that local communities are wrestling with. But I think that what you see on the screen is kind of what we've seen from what opponents say. This is one that's going to be heavily supported from probably the rural areas of our state, pretty heavily supported probably from our suburban areas, could be more 50-50, and then urban areas will be a little bit more hesitant to adopt this as part of our Oklahoma Constitution. Yes, ma'am.
Has the state of Oklahoma to this point acted to prohibit local governments from protecting their interests when it comes to agriculture?
I don't know the answer to that question in its entirety. State law and the Oklahoma legislature passes many laws that affect the ability of local communities from being able to actually pass something. I don't know anything off the top of my head in terms of if they've done something specifically. They've, for the most part, continue to allow for those local communities to make those decisions. And this would probably not completely prohibit based on our reading of what State Question 777, this would not completely prohibit local communities from being able to do so as well, as long as it falls within the guidelines of the Oklahoma Constitution. But The answer to your question, I can't completely answer. There's a whole lot of titles within state law. There's a whole lot of bills that are passed on a yearly basis. I can't answer your question in its entirety.